welcome everybody as you're joining. We have a really good session this morning lined up for you or depending on what time of the day you're actually joining us from. But today we have a great session with Robby. As you're all joining, I think let me just give you a little bit of an insight into how we actually find our speakers. We get asked this question a lot. How do you onboard speakers? What's your process? What goes on? And look, Kathy Johnson, who actually organizes an awful lot of these sessions and who's on the call this morning, is behind a lot of the sort of, let's say, frontline work. So when we look for speakers, you can imagine the usual will apply. So it's, have they got great content? Are they expert in their field? Do they have sort of like a strong sense of purpose? Do they deliver well? Is there some sort of resemblance of uniqueness into what they're doing? Are they relevant to what our customers seem to be looking for and have been looking for in the years gone by? Obviously, all of those questions are asked and answered and everything else. But there is one that I could touch on. There's a few more, but there's one that I thought I'd touch on this morning, and that's just about what kind of character the speaker actually is. And as we all know, it's one of the most stressful environments in the world that we work in, and particularly our customers. So we look for speakers that have manners, that are considerate, and that's been our experience with Robby. We've tested him on a couple of things, and you can only find that out when something goes wrong, right? And he has been, look at the sense of humor on his slide that we have this morning. So he's been nothing but considerate, shown great character, and certainly manners all the way. Like someone who's going to get involved and partner with you through your experience and make it ultimately a great experience for the audience. So we've got, we won't do a formal introduction for Robby because I'm sure you've seen and read his profile, and that's why you're here this morning. Yeah, Robby, I'm going to hand it over to you and take us away. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very kind. Yeah, thank you. I do pride myself on the basics. At the end of the day, you've got to just be yourself, be humble, and no matter the size of the audience or where you're speaking in the world, at the end of the day, I'm just Rob, that kid from the East Rand, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself. But thank you. This is one of the, this is a new slide, and it gets people thinking and asking what my real problem is, because I speak about the hardships I've endured in life, and that's not exactly what you think. That's the theory of how I rebuilt my life from the ground up. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that story. But now that I have your attention, I want you to listen for just a little bit of time, and it'll all make sense, I promise. So I usually work with people and finding what makes them tick. At the end of the day, I don't speak to companies, I speak to employees, because without the employees, the company is an empty shell and a photostat machine and a lot of expensive furniture. So I like to dig right in there, because if we can find out what makes those people tick, then we can start to work with them. We know what their triggers are, we know what their passion points are, and we can start to utilize that to just grow everything around them. I love to use the analogy of a clock, because we all know that kind of person. Before we woke up to cell phones, there were these things called alarm clocks. And you would wind it up, and every day at some ungodly hour, it would go off and make a hell of a noise, and you would get up and hit it on the top. And that's how we got up in the mornings. And those clocks would often stop working. And you could tell that the clock had stopped working because nothing was happening on the face. Everything had stopped moving. And we know people like this. You look at them and you can see there's nothing going on in their face. If you listen in on the back, there's nothing happening deep down inside. And you've got to find out what makes that clock work. So either you wind it up or put a new battery in. Usually when I do talks, I say, what do you do with a broken clock? And someone from the back always goes, throw it away. And that's usually the HR director. But no, if you can find out what makes that clock tick again, very soon you'll see something happening on the face. You'll see there's something going on behind the scenes. And on a deeper level, you can actually think that every little cog and lever and little spring inside is doing what it was put on earth to do. Because now we're starting to touch on meaning, but that's a different slideshow altogether. So I work with people to find out what makes them tick. From a very young age, I was very lucky. I knew what made me tick. I was very in touch with the things that brought me to life. This photo was taken when I was 27 years old. I just climbed Kilimanjaro for the second time, and we were cruising around Zanzibar with 260 Rand in our pockets and making every decision based on a 5 Rand coin. We flipped the coin. If it landed on heads, we'd go left. If it landed on tails, we'd go right. And that's how we lived for the week. And that's exactly how my life was before my accident. I would, I was a very happy clam and the world was my oyster. I had been to 4 of the highest peaks on Earth. I'd climbed the highest point in Africa, Kilimanjaro, twice. I'd been to South America. I'd climbed in Russia. I'd climbed in Peru. Everything was going my way. I was engaged to be married. But even before that, from a very young age, I was even cooler than that. You see, when I was young, I wanted to be Indiana Jones. We all wanted to be Indiana Jones, right? That phase where you jump off your brother's cupboard onto the bed and crack one of the pine slats, and then onto the dresser, and then onto your bed, and then a dive roll out of the bedroom because the floor is made out of lava, obviously. So we all went through that phase. And after that phase, if you're smiling, you did it too. After that phase was the ninja phase. And then I went through the sniper spy phase. For about 6 months of my life, I wanted to be a firefighter. And nowadays, I only get to be a firefighter 2 nights of the year. One's Valentine's and the other's my wife's birthday. But that different slideshow completely. So from a very young age, I knew exactly what it was that would make me tick. And I think that's guided me on this path less traveled. And we carry on about life until things happen. If you've got small kids, you know that it's really fun at night to get them into the right pajamas, into the right bed, and to actually get them to go to sleep. And the reason that they're so reluctant is because they know the fact that tomorrow they wake up a day older. And if we do that enough times, eventually we wake up and we're adulting 24/7. Now, I don't know if you know this guy. His real name is Fawn. In South Africa, we call him Fawn. When I speak overseas, he's just that guy. But Fawn, shame, it's not even his real name. It's just what people call him because that's all he ever says. Hey, buddy, how's things going? Oh, Fawn. How was the long weekend? Fawn. Can you have that list of clients on my desk by Monday? Fawn. Everything is just Fawn with this guy. And shame, if you have a look at him, he's got the face of a collapsed lung and a personality to match. Rumor has it the guy's so lazy he even married a pregnant woman. But the guy's right about one thing. Paul's like, a little bit of Irish humor there. He's right about one thing. I said to him, Fawn, how are you really doing? And don't say fine. And he said, yeah, I'm surviving. And we've all used that in the last couple of weeks. I mean, we're 1/4 of the way into this year, almost halfway, and we're all just making it to Friday, just trying to survive one day longer. Just make it to Friday, just make it to December, just make it to my own retirement, just, make it to your own funeral. Shane, poor Fawn over here, he died at the age of 60, but was only buried at the age of 80 because no one really noticed. But he was right. He is just in a state of survival. And in South Africa in particular, everybody's got a different take on what survival means. And for some people, it's standing at a traffic light with their hand out, hoping to get enough money to eat that night. That's a state of survival. For some people, they're victims of crime, and state of survival means just making it tomorrow with you and your family. But for a lot of us, we're in a state of survival and we don't even know it. We tell our psychologist or our counselor that it's a rut. I'm stuck in a rut. You know that feeling where you're getting up out of the same bed to go to the same job, to sit in the same traffic, to earn the same money, to pay the same bills. And if we work a little harder, you get a nicer car to go and sit in the same traffic, to go to the same job, to report to the same manager, to earn the same money, to pay the same bills. And it's just a cycle. And humans are funny things because although we think we're at the top of the food chain, we're actually not that smart because we will continue to do that until something makes us change. On Everest, the concept of survival is brought to life, and it's as clear as day. This is a climber that I met on the way down from the summit, and he had stopped surviving. He joined the 383 other bodies on the mountain of the people who just decided they couldn't make it to tomorrow. In order to stop living on Everest, all you have to do is just stop trying to stay alive. If you look at how the guy's lying, I mean, he didn't come down in an avalanche. There's no bite marks from the Yeti, anything like that. He just lay back, his hands in his lap, his head back, and gave up. Unfortunately, that was his demise. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of us felt when the alarm went off this morning on a Monday. We lie there kind of going, oh boy, another week. And a state of survival is not a great place to be. You can ask Bear Grylls himself, who's a multi-millionaire in pounds with book deals, TV shows. He even has his own amusement park now. And for someone with that much money and influence, he certainly has to drink a lot of his own pee. So survival's not somewhere we want to stay. There's got to be something more. Now, if you've ever seen the movie Fight Club, I'm going to break the rule and tell you something about Fight Club. If you haven't seen the movie, they bring this idea of triggers to life. Triggers are those things that make us stop what we're doing, think about the situation, and change direction. In the movie, Brad Pitt puts a gun to the back of a guy's head and says, give me your wallet. And he eventually shuffles through it till he finds a student card that had expired. And he said, what happened? He says, I was going to be a vet. And he says, and then? He says, oh, I got busy, work is a problem, I've got children now. And Brad Pitt cocks that gun and brings the problem to life. He says, I'm coming back in 2 months' time because I know where you live now. If you're not busting your ass to become a vet, if you're not doing what's important to you, you're going to die. And in the book, it's written so beautifully. He says the next thing Raymond K. Hessel ate was the most exquisite thing he'd ever tasted. And tomorrow was about to be the most beautiful day of his life. You see, us humans are so silly. We'll stay in the state of just making it to tomorrow until something slaps you in the face to make you wake up. You know, we all have this problem in life. This happens. You know, this, we've all had our this. For some people, it's this diagnosis. For some people, it's this retrenchment, this divorce, this relationship, this job, this, you know, if it starts with this, it's usually a bad thing. And the sad thing is no one's immune. You will all have your this. And I suppose this is not the motivation you wanted on a Monday morning. But this will happen. And it's what we do about this that changes everything. Let me tell you a little bit about my this. On the 26th of April, 2006, I was playing Indiana Jones. I was at an indoor climbing gym. And all I did, I can't even say I fell. All I did, it was the end of the night. I turned and I jumped from 2 meters above the mat and landed on the safety mat. Except this time there was a tear in the cover. And my feet went down toes first until they hit the concrete. Then they turned inside and backwards. Crunch. I heard both my ankles break. There were 9 breaks in my left foot, 14 breaks in my right foot. I partially detached my Achilles tendon from my right foot. I ruptured everything from the knees down, and then things were about to get worse. I got rushed off to the emergency room, and I would be put into temporary casts, and the next morning I would wake up to the first of 8 surgeries as they attempted to rebuild my ankles. And the sad thing is, that my ankles might have been being put back together, but my life was falling apart, one piece at a time. At the age of 28, to move back in with your parents, the only way I can explain it is, if you know the end of the world is coming, move back in with your mom, because 1 week will probably feel like forever and a day. At 28 years old, I moved back into mom's apartment, which was in a 1 floor up, in a 2-bedroom little apartment with 1 bathroom, which I couldn't fit the wheelchair into. And there were 15 steps from the front door down to the car park. I remember that because I had to do it sitting down, 1 foot in a big moon boot, another foot down, bum, foot, bum, foot, bum, foot, bum, 15 times till I could get to the car park, only to watch a 60-year-old woman try and wrestle a wheelchair into the back of a Renault. And it's absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, the good news is my mom did sell the Renault, but my life was about to deteriorate 1 step at a time. So we fast forward 7 months and 3 surgeries later, and I'm still not able to recover. Unfortunately, they hadn't found all the breaks just because, you know, I was lucky enough to have the best shoulder surgeon in the country working on my ankles. And a couple of breaks went undetected, which slowed down the process and left me in a position where I no longer looked forward to my future. I was engaged to be married, and I was sleeping less and less because this idea of starting a life with somebody when I'm up to my eyeballs in debt, unemployed, unable to work from home. I mean, this was the days of dial-up, and things were just looking bad. On the 3rd of November that year, I remember it very, very well because it was the day that changed absolutely everything. It was the 3rd year anniversary of my fiance and I. We'd been dating for 3 years. And so I phoned her and I said, hey, do you want to come around and we can talk about this wedding? And maybe bring your parents because it's going to be a big discussion. And boy, was it. This discussion turned into this screaming match, and it became all about this situation. And eventually her father accused me of trying to run away. All I wanted to do was move the wedding a year later. And he said, it sounds to me, boy, like you're trying to run away. And had I thought of it, you know, when you always have that argument and afterwards you go, oh, I should have said. I so really wanted to say to him, really? Wheelchair jokes now? But anyway, that all went pear-shaped and I found myself staring down a handful of painkillers. My this had deteriorated between a decision to live a life I didn't want to or end it all. That was my this. These 2 legs that I hadn't signed up for, being, you know, stuck in a chair for almost a year, had destroyed this concept of what I call the future. And I wasn't prepared to carry on with this. So I started counting painkillers. You know, you can't kill yourself with a Gillette Mark III. I didn't have access to a gun. My climbing ropes were in the top of my wardrobe. They might as well have been on the moon. Anything higher than a meter, I couldn't reach. And it came down to a point where I promised myself I would take 70 tablets because I knew 35 would kill me, but I had to do a proper job because my fear was leaving a vegetable on a heart-lung machine for my mom to look after. And that wasn't on her bucket list. So there I sat counting tablets. I'll spare you the gory details. There were only 57 tablets in the bottle. I was stuck with this. So this had to change. Within a few weeks of being surrounded by the right people, getting the right therapy, getting away from the bad drugs, onto the right medication, you know, you can't climb big mountains on your own. I was able to change this from I don't want to heal into I'm going to get better. Now, a lot of people think, well, how did you go from a wheelchair to the top of Mount Everest? And the trick is right there, that much. I made a decision that day. I said, tomorrow I'll be that much braver, that much more resilient. And tomorrow I'm going to get out of bed and put on fresh, clean clothes because that had stopped happening. And the next day I would be that much stronger than I was the day before. And I would put on clean clothes and make an appointment to go back to the physiotherapist because I'd given up on that. And the next day I would be that much tougher and more resilient and start to build my way up. That first day I got out of bed, I called that day 1. And it began a journey of moving closer and closer to the dream of a lifetime. You see, 2 years before my accident, I had that tattooed across my shoulders. A lot of people look at this slide and kind of go, oh, it's his shoulders. But yes, I promise, that's from shoulder to shoulder across my back. And that's where I'll tell people that my bucket list saved my life. I hadn't heard of the idea of a bucket list. That would only come later. But it was a dream I had the chance to fall back on that got me to get out of bed. Have a look at this little video. This is what Discovery Channel said about me on Everest.
South African Robby Kotejin, a climbing accident put him in a wheelchair. Doctors said he'd never climb again.
I can walk. I can't trust my own body. I managed to shatter everything from the ankle down. I can't turn my feet outward like that. It's just a bit of a mess, really.
He gets a lot of pain in his ankles when it slows him down, makes him slightly more clumsy, and all of those things together are potentially dangerous in this situation.
You have to love the euphemism of the Brits, hey, potentially dangerous in this situation. That little slide I took down the fixed lines was on the Lhotse face. And if you have a look at that, you'll see that the Lhotse face itself is the size of Table Mountain. Potentially dangerous, absolutely. Risking my life for something completely ridiculous? Pretty much, yes. Now, if you know anything about Mount Everest, you know it's the highest mountain in the world. And a lot of people go, well, that's absolutely crazy. Rob, you're in a wheelchair. That's impossible. And I took that word impossible and I thought about it for a while. You know, you've got to listen to advice. And I said, well, you know what? I'm going to climb this mountain because it's pretty much as impossible as everything else right now. And it gave me a reason to get out of bed and to be that much better than I was the day before. So that became the dream. That became the reason to live, because I'd lost everything else. To give you a little bit of context, Mount Everest is 9 times the size of Table Mountain. Pile 9 Table Mountains on top of each other, and now you have an idea of what it's like. You're looking at 16, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, 16 of those, end to end, is the same height as Mount Everest. It's the only part of the earth that exists out of the atmosphere that we live in. And so if you want to go, it's kind of like a bring and buy vibe, you know. If you want to go, you've got to take your own oxygen. It's kind of a bring or die scenario. But it's a really nice place. You know, I'm not doing a great job of selling it. The warmest it's ever been on top of Mount Everest is minus 16 degrees. But the dream had spoken, and I was to go. Now, there were a couple of problems with getting to Mount Everest. One of them was finding 900,000 Rand to do it, especially when you're in the red in every bank account you have. So I had to do a lot of changing. I had to change this. The mountain wasn't going anywhere. It was me that had to do the changing. And I take people on this journey of the little small changes and the small decisions that I made along the way to turn the dream, as ridiculous as it may sound, as abstract for most people, into a reality. Because on day 448, I grew that much, because I went from a wheelchair onto crutches. I was now taller than I'd been in a whole year. And a few months later after that, I was able to get rid of the crutches because I could now walk upright. I walked with a limp and a bit of a hobble, but that was enough to start training to make my way to the top of the mountain. Along the way, we learned, I bring in the themes of things like balance. You know, on a crevasse, you lose your balance, you go 300 meters down into a black hole of ice. And this is what that looks like from the top. I use the parallel of the crevasses on Everest to bring this idea of balance to life, because we're all juggling so many balls. And balance, this is your crash course in balance. We can all become employee of the year, but family life suffers, or you can be dad of the year, but you kind of get fired for never being there. So we've got to find a way of being able to be everything and within moderation. So another thing is doing the impossible. And that's one of my favorite words, because it's constantly being rewritten. Recently, this weekend, the static breath holding record was broken. Somebody can hold their breath lying face down in a swimming pool for 24 minutes now. Now, that sounds absolutely abstract, but it was done on Saturday morning. Climbing to the highest mountain on Earth up until 1953 was impossible. And we're constantly rewriting these things. And for a lot of people, they go to their sales conference and that impossible is in the right-hand bottom corner of the PowerPoint slide. And that's this year's target. And it's pretty much double what they wanted last year. And that looks impossible. We deal with those sorts of things and how we come about those and how do we deal with those obstacles? Because if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other and making the basic things happen, keeping the consistency and the dedication and keeping the goals top of mind, by putting your foot one in front of the other about 56,000 times, everything is possible. This is from a Discovery Channel documentary that I featured in. They stuck a camera in my face all the way to the top of the world, through the good bits and the bad. And this is what the top of the world looks like. I hope you enjoy it. Yeah.
As Chris waits out the wave of illness, Robby climbs the last few feet to the summit.
We're just over the moon, 2.5 years project. And it's here. It's rightly go.
as I conclude the rest of the presentation, I take people through the basic techniques and the use of bucket lists and bucket lists, all those things you need to get rid of to make room for something better. And people walk away full of energy, inspired. And if I can do one thing, I can prove that Joe Soap from nowhere with dodgy ankles can get to the top of the world. It makes people ask, what are they capable of? And let's talk about that word impossible. Thank you very much. If anybody's got any questions, you're more than welcome to ask me. I'm open to discuss anything from mental health questions. Suicide prevention is something I'm very passionate about. I'm an advocate for mental health, especially for men in South Africa and abroad. And yeah, if you want to climb Mount Everest, I can give you a list of what to do and what not to do. But yeah, I'm open to any questions if you'd like to fire away. Nobody? Anybody? It's really funny. The first question that usually pops up is, how do you pee when it's minus 47 degrees? And the answer is, put your back to the wind and get it done as soon as possible. There is no time like now. Should I stop sharing? How's that? Does that work better? Let's put it on a nice visual. There we go.
There's not always a lot of questions, Robby.
Okay.
But there is some nice comments in the group, and it was a wonderful, emotional charged story, no doubt about it. And yeah, I mean, well done.
Thank you.
Such a, it's so relevant, I think, to what's happening out there in the world. I don't know. It's such a stressful time. I don't know if it implies individually to everyone I'm full, but certainly the audience and the companies we serve, it's real.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was wonderful. But Kathy, maybe I'll hand over to you and you can see some of the comments or close up with Robby. But Robby, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, it's very difficult to put it across a 4-year chapter of my life into 20 minutes. And yeah, the next chapter actually starts in 2 weeks' time. I'm heading on a plane back to Alaska to go for a 3rd attempt on the highest point in North America. So if you guys want to complain about the weather in Joburg, please get over yourselves.
Well, if you bring that humor with you, I think it will certainly help.
Oh, you absolutely have to.
Yeah, you do. There's just a few sort of comments here. Lauren Lee said, thank you. It was incredibly inspirational. From our team at BidFood, thank you for sharing your story with us. And then there was another one, wow, Robby, such an inspiration. Thank you for your story. Yeah, there's quite a few wows there as well. So
brilliant.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, yeah. I look forward to bringing the full wow. When you hire Robby, you get the full package. And like I said, no questions are off limits. I'm happy to speak about anything and anything that pops up from my talk at your particular event. I'm happy to facilitate. Yeah, I think the record at the moment is 2.5 hours in the Q&A session, the things that arose during the talk and resonated with people in the audience. But yeah, we don't need to break that record. Yes.
Well, I also did love your sense of humor. It is a very serious subject. And when you said survival is not a place to stay, that definitely is something that, many people get stuck in that rut, and then life does get difficult. And I can definitely relate to this because in this context, it is a very negative word, and you do have to try and climb out of that mind space. But I think what you've managed to achieve, it just shows that people can do it in their own lives, just whichever way they need to do it. It doesn't have to be climbing Mount Everest or anything like that. But yeah. So
thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for spending this time to listen to Robby, and I hope you've learned a few things from him, and you can take it out and practice what his message is. And then don't forget to tune in next week at 9 o'clock. Professor Alistair McKenna will be speaking on servicing to succeed. Thanks very much, Robby.
Thank you, guys. Have a fantastic week.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Keep well. Bye-bye.
Bye.